if the Lord was speaking, and he did speak directly to Cain after this, or before actually, the issue of him slaying his brother, but God spoke directly to Cain, my question is, obviously we don't have a record of other things that the Lord spoke to them, but I guarantee that wasn't the first time that the Lord spoke to them. First, I'm going to start with the works of Josephus. And we're on the subject of Cain. Still. Because it's somewhat interesting to hear some of the things that, especially from Josephus, this tells you, between all the different sources that I'm touching on, that there had to have been material early on, whether it comes from rabbinic traditions, or some of these may be like voilages, they're combinations woven together, but there's all kinds of interesting tidbits all over the place. So I'm reading out of the Antiquities of the Jews, Josephus, concerning the posterity of Adam and the 10 generations from him to the deluge, which is the section I'm reading from. And just a little sidebar, there's a footnote in Josephus that says the number of Adam's children, as says the old tradition, was 33 sons and 23 daughters. Ouch. No wonder why Eve was wandering around on her own. Get that thing away from me. Okay, it's still PG time here, so settle down. Adam and Eve had 2 sons. The elder of them was named Cain, which name, when it is interpreted, signifies a possession. The younger was Abel, which signifies sorrow. Again, not everybody's in agreement on the names and the meanings of the names, rather. They also had, it's just a brief footnote, they also had daughters. That's it. Now the 2 brethren were pleased with different courses of life. For Abel, the younger, was a lover of righteousness, and believing that God was present at all his actions, he excelled in virtue. And his employment was that of a shepherd. But Cain was not only very wicked in other respects, but was wholly intent upon getting. And he first contrived to plow the ground. He slew his brother on the occasion following. They had resolved to sacrifice to God. Now Cain brought the fruits of the earth and of his husbandry, but Abel brought milk, the first fruits of his flock. But God was more delighted with the latter oblation, when he was honored with what grew naturally of its own accord, than what was the invention of a covetous man and gotten by forcing the ground. Once it was that Cain was very angry that Abel was preferred by God before him, and he slew his brother, and hid his dead body, thinking to escape discovery. But God, knowing what had been done, came to Cain, asked him what became of his brother, because he had not seen him for many days, whereas he used to observe them conversing together at other times. But Cain was in doubt with himself, and knew not what answer to give God. At first he said he was himself at a loss about his brother's disappearing, but when he was provoked by God, who pressed him vehemently, as resolving to know what the matter was, he replied that he was not his brother's guardian or keeper, nor was he an observer of all that he did. But in return God convicted Cain as having been the murderer of his brother, and said, I wonder at thee, that thou knowest not what is become of a man whom thou thyself hast destroyed. God therefore did not inflict the punishment of death upon him on account of his offering sacrifice, and thereby making supplication to him to not be extreme in his wrath to him. But he made him accursed and threatened his posterity in the 7th generation. He also cast him together with his wife out of the land. And when he was afraid that in wandering he should fall among wild beasts, and by that means should perish, God bid him to not entertain such a melancholy suspicion, and to go all over the earth without fear of whatever mischief he might suffer from the wild beasts. Setting a mark upon him that he might be known, he commanded him to depart. Now it's interesting because whatever source Josephus is using is going from an older tradition that says, why would Cain fear somebody slaying him? Because the people in his time would have been his brothers and sisters. So this comes from an older tradition that says he had fear of the beasts. But anyway, you see why I said there's all kinds of areas where you could probably pursue the source material for each of these that I'm going to read from, or maybe some further origins. It says, when Cain had traveled over many countries, he with his wife built a city named Nod, which is a place so called, and there he settled his abode where he had children. However, he did not accept of his punishment in order to amendment, but to increase his wickedness, for he aimed to procure everything that was for his own bodily pleasure, though it obliged him to be injurious to his neighbors. And you've got a whole interesting saga that continues, a recap, and then it goes on to the rest of the Genesis passage. I've read enough from here to give you an idea. That's Josephus. Book of Jubilees, which is kind of interesting because it does not say too much more than the information that we kind of already knew. Book of Jubilees. And in the 3rd week, in the 2nd Jubilee, she gave birth to Cain, Eve. And in the 4th, she gave birth to Abel. And in the 5th, she gave birth to her daughter, Awan. Here there's a space between. Some traditions hold that although they were born separately, their birth is recorded separately. Some records say that they were born hours apart, therefore they were twins, but they were born apart. Here, obviously, from this source, they are born one in the 4th and in the 5th Jubilee. And in the 1st year of the 3rd Jubilee, Cain slew Abel because God accepted the sacrifice of Abel, but did not accept the offering of Cain. And he slew him in the field, and his blood cried from the ground to heaven, complaining because he had slain him. And the Lord reproved Cain because of Abel, because he had slain him, and made him a fugitive on earth because of the blood of his brother, and cursed him upon the earth. And on this account it is written on the heavenly tables, Cursed is he who smiteth his neighbor treacherously, and let all who have seen and heard say, So be it. And the man who hath seen and not declared it, let him be accursed as the other. And for this reason we announce when we come before the Lord our God all the sin which is committed in heaven and on earth, and in light and darkness, and everywhere. Adam and his wife mourned for Abel 4 weeks of years. And in the 4th year of the 5th week, they became joyful, and Adam knew his wife again, and she bare him a son, and called his name Seth. It's pretty much all you get, except for this little detail here, which is in the 6th week, Let me read, I'll go back and read straight through, it'll make more sense. His wife bare again, she called him Seth, for he said, God hath raised up a second seed unto us on the earth instead of Abel, for Cain slew him. And in the 6th week he begat his daughter Azurah. And in the 6th, Cain took Awan, that's the sister, to be his wife, and she bare him Enoch at the close of the 4th Jubilee. And in the 1st year of the 1st week of the 5th Jubilee, houses were built on earth, and Cain built a city and called it after the name of his son Enoch. It says that Adam knew Eve his wife, and she bare yet 9 sons. This is this record. That's why I said you kind of have to take all this material and sift a little bit here and there to figure out what exactly one ought to do with all of this. In the 5th week of the 5th Jubilee, Seth took Azurah, his sister, to be his wife, and in the 4th year of the 6th week, she bare him Enos. And he began to call on the name of the Lord on the earth. So that's Jubilees. That's all you're going to get from that record, which is kind of interesting. I don't know why. I find this completely fascinating. There's a lot of good questions. I'm sure people have asked through the ages. My biggest question, apart from you read the passage and there's just kind of a strange, actually there's a lot of questions here. If the Lord was speaking, and he did speak directly to Cain after this, or before actually, the issue of him slaying his brother, but God spoke directly to Cain. My question is, obviously we don't have a record of other things that the Lord spoke to them, but I guarantee that wasn't the first time that the Lord spoke to them. Now, people talk about, well, it just goes into an offering. This first, forget about what happened in the fall. The first debacle, if you will, surrounding dimensions of it could be jealousy, could be disrespect or hatred for God's ways, but what does it center around? An offering. It's an age-old problem. I don't know, I look at these things and I think, there's a great message on giving right there. If you give right, you might get done in. Anybody want to give an offering now? Didn't think so. Let's take a look at what this Targum, this is the Pseudo-Jonathan, which I believe I've already read to you, but I'm going to read it again. So, as I said yesterday, what is pretty important, and there used to be one ministry on TV that had this, they perpetuated this for as long as I can remember, of Eve having intercourse with the serpent and therefore producing this evil seed and so forth, which I said the roots of that come from this source. Adam knew his wife Eve, who had conceived from Samael, the angel of the Lord, which is not to be understood as angel of the Lord in a good sense. Then from Adam, her husband, she bore his twin sisters and Abel. Twin sisters and Abel. Abel was a keeper of sheep. Cain was a man tilling the earth. After a certain time, on the 14th of Nisan, just happen to know the precise date, Cain brought, and it was the 11th hour, Cain brought of the produce of the land of the seed of flax as an offering of first fruits before the Lord. Abel on his part brought of the firstling of the flock and of their fat parts. It was pleasing before the Lord. He turned a friendly face towards Abel and his offering, but to Cain and his offering he did not turn a friendly face. This grieved Cain very much, and the expression of his face was downcast. And the Lord said to Cain, "Why are you angry, and why is the expression of your face downcast? If you perform your deeds well, your guilt will be forgiven you. If you will not perform your deeds well in this world, your sin will be retained for the day of great judgment. Sin crouches at the gates of your heart, but in your hand I have placed power over the evil inclination." That's an interesting verse right there. Its desires will be towards you, but you will have dominion over it, whether to be innocent or to sin. Cain said to his brother Abel, "Come, let us go outside." And when the two of them had gone outside, which means that they were somehow inside, because the other source said that they began to live in houses. So I don't know. Listen, I just pick all this and retain the little details, and I'm trying to put this all together in almost in a homogenized picture. And there can be a lot of confusion if you're trying to, sort this out. I said, "Come on, let's go outside," because they were inside. Whatever inside portion of whatever they were in, they went outside. "Come, let us go outside." And they went outside. The two of them had gone outside. Cain spoke up and said to Abel, "I see that the world was created with mercy, but it is not governed according to the fruit of good deeds, and there is partiality in judgment. Therefore your offering was accepted with favor, but my offering was not accepted from me with favor." And Abel answered and said to Cain, The world was created with mercy. It is governed according to the fruit of good deeds, and there is no partiality in judgment, because the fruit of my deeds was better than yours, and more prompt than yours. My offering was accepted with favor. Cain answered and said to Abel, "There is no judgment, there is no judge, and there is no other world. There is no gift of good reward for the righteous, and no punishment for the wicked." And Abel answered and said to Cain, There is judgment, there is a judge, there is another world, there is a gift of good reward for the righteous, and there is punishment for the wicked. Concerning these matters they were quarreling in the open country, and Cain rose up against Abel his brother, and drove a stone into his forehead, and killed him. And the Lord said to Cain, "Where is your brother Abel?" He said, "I do not know. Am I perhaps my brother's keeper?" Then he said, "What have you done? The voice of the blood of the murder of your brother, which has been swallowed up by the clay, cries out from before me, from the earth. And now because you have killed him, cursed are you from the earth, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you till the earth, it shall not continue to yield the strength of its fruit to you. You shall be a wanderer and an exile on earth." Cain said before the Lord, "My rebellion is much too great to bear, but you are able to forgive it. Behold, you have driven me out this day from the face of the earth. Is it possible for me to hide from you? And if I am a wanderer and an exile upon the earth, any righteous person who finds me will kill me." Now you can see the sources from Josephus to here vary, because here this actually goes with tradition of our text that we are reading in the King James, where Cain is fearing to be found by another person and killed. And of course, the animal problem is quite problematic because of the response of what the Lord says when the Lord says to him, "Therefore whosoever slayeth Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold." Yeah, the tiger did it. Furthermore, if you keep reading in that same chapter, later on it says that Lamech said unto his wives, Ada and Zillah, hear ye my voice, ye wives of Lamech, hearken unto my speech. For I have slain a man to my wounding, and a young man to my hurt. If Cain shall be avenged sevenfold, truly Lamech 70 and sevenfold. So, and of course that's prompted many people to ask what happened to Cain. In fact, strangely enough, in my mail today, a letter came from somebody asking, how did Cain die? Because this individual read somewhere that Cain was murdered. And you can't ask more questions than me. All right, here we go. I'm going to keep reading this just for a little bit here. So, you're going to love this one. You know, our King James simply says that God placed a mark, right? Just a mark. There's been much speculation as to what that mark is or was. This source says the Lord traced on Cain's face a letter of the great and glorious name, so that anyone who would find him upon seeing it on him would not kill him. But you'd have to be able to read it. Sorry, my brain goes like, oh, I didn't know that was a letter. That was a fashion statement. Boom, you're dead. Cain went out from the presence of the Lord, settled in the land of the wandering of his exile, which had been made on his account from the beginning in the Garden of Eden. Cain knew his wife, she conceived and bore Enoch. He built a city, named the city after the name of his son. And then it just keeps continuing down. And what you have in the passage I just read that was further on regarding Lamech to his wives, it says here in this translation, it says here, hearken to my voice, wives of Lamech, listen to my word. I have not killed a man so that I should be killed for him, neither have I wounded a young man so that my offspring should be exterminated because of him. If for Cain, who sinned and repented, judgment was suspended for 7 generations, it is surely right that for Lamech and his grandson, who did not sin, judgment should be suspended for 77. Okay, where'd they get that? I don't know. That was from Pseudo-Jonathan. And then from Ph.D., from the Targum Pseudo-Jonathan, the bulk of, I'm just kind of scanning this, is very close to our text from the King James, and it's very, very close. I'll take up exactly where it may slightly differ. Okay, the same thing is being said, so I'm going to read this. Cain said to his brother Abel, come, let the 2 of us go out into the open field. When the 2 of them had gone out into the open field, Cain answered and said to Abel, I perceive that the world was not created by mercy, and that it is not being conducted according to the fruits of good words, and that there is favoritism in judgment. Why was your offering received favorably, and my offering was not received favorably from me? Abel answered and said to Cain, I perceive that the world was created by mercy, and that it is being conducted according to the fruits of good words. And because my works were better than yours, my offering was received from me favorably, and yours was not received favorably from you. Cain answered and said to Abel, there is no judgment, there is no judge, there is no other world, there is no giving of good reward to the just, nor is vengeance exacted of the wicked. And Abel answered and said to Cain, there is judgment, there is a judge, there is another world, there is the giving of a good reward to the just, and vengeance is exacted of the wicked in the world to come. Concerning this matter of the 2 of them that were disputing in the open field, Cain rose up against Abel his brother and killed him. And that pretty much is the variation here is, as the Lord is speaking to Cain, Cain said to the Lord, "My debts are too numerous to bear. Before you, however, there is power to remit and to pardon. Behold, you banish me this day from the face of the earth, yet from before you it is not possible for me to hide. And Cain shall be an exile and a wanderer on the earth, and anyone who meets him will kill him. And the Lord swore to him, anyone who kills Cain, judgment will be suspended for him for 7 generations. And the Lord placed a sign on Cain so that anyone who might meet him would not kill him." The sign said, "Do not kill him." Oh, I can't read. That's right. Sorry. Pretty much the same text is very close to the King James, so I'm not even going to read from that. But last but not least is the text that I read in part from yesterday, which is the Book of Adam and Eve, also called the conflict of Adam and Eve with Satan. And what's so interesting about this is this particular source records every time that Satan appears in the Genesis account. And it'll say, this is the 7th time. So this writing is very concerned with how many times the deceiver appears and manages to do, including, by the way, it says Satan came to Cain in the figure of a man in the field. And I'm not sure if it says how many times, if this was the umpteenth time. Let me go back to them having children. Kind of interesting. So there's all kinds of interesting stuff in here. It's almost, there's almost too much interesting stuff in here to just pick a place and jump in. And by the way, I think this work was also known as the Cave of Treasures. It's the conflict of Adam and Eve with Satan, but I think it was also known as the Cave of Treasures for some reason, I think, in its original titling. Okay, let me just pick a place here and jump in. All right, the children began to wax stronger and to grow in stature, but Cain was hard-hearted and ruled over his younger brother. Oftentimes, when his father made an offering, he would remain behind and not go up with them to offer up. Because earlier in this particular writing, it talks about the place where Adam offered, what he offered, how he offered it, gives a lot of information. So this is kind of an interesting, perhaps, insight as to this, when we read in our text simply how it unfolds. Give some insight, perhaps. But as to Abel, he had a meek heart, was obedient to his father and mother, whom he often moved to make an offering because he loved it. He prayed and fasted much. Then came this sign to Abel, as he was coming into the cave of treasures, there it is, and saw the golden rods and the incense and myrrh, inquired of his parents, Adam and Eve, concerning them, and said unto them, how did you come by these? How did you acquire them? Adam told him all that had befallen them. And Abel felt deeply about what his father had told him. Furthermore, his father Adam told him of the works of God and of the garden, and after that he remained behind his father the whole of that night in the cave of treasures. That night while he was praying, here we go, Satan appeared unto him under the figure of a man, who said to him, thou hast oftentimes moved thy father to make an offering, to fast and to pray. Therefore I will kill thee and make thee perish from this world. Kind of interesting. But as for Abel, he prayed to God and drove away Satan from him, and believed not the words of the devil. Then when it was day, an angel of God appeared unto him, who said to him, Shorten neither fasting, praying, nor offering up oblation unto thy God, for lo, the Lord has accepted thy prayer. Be not afraid of the figure which appeared unto thee in the night, and who cursed thee unto death. And the angel departed from him. And when it was day, Abel came to Adam and Eve, told them of the vision he had seen. But when they heard it, they grieved much over it, yet said nothing to him. They only comforted him. But as to hard-hearted Cain, Satan came to him by night, showed himself, and said unto him, Since Adam and Eve loved thy brother Abel much more than they love thee, and wish to join him in marriage to thy beautiful sister, because they love him, but wish to join thee in marriage to his ill-favored sister, because they hate thee. Now therefore I counsel thee, when they do that, to kill your brother. Then thy sister will be left for thee, and his sister will be cast away. And Satan departed from him, but the wicked one remained behind in the heart of Cain, who sought many a time to kill his brother. I think that's kind of interesting. Again, this is just, we could talk about apocryphal writing, and we can talk about writing that is much later. The Targums we know are probably very close to 1st century. This is a big question mark. There's a lot of debate as to the age of this text, but it's certainly interesting to read some of the color of what is, at least it does let you sit back a little bit, go reread the passage that's so familiar to us, and think on all these things, because it does open up, and you have to consider possibly all of these things, even if they're just ideas, to what was in the heart of Cain to kill his brother. So anyway, there's much more. I'm actually kind of fascinated by all the stuff that's in here, because as I said, I'm not saying that this should replace, and I would put this particular book as there's primary source material, the Bible, secondary source, which we could call the Targums. I'd put this probably down the pipeline in 4th or 5th ranking of source material, to not take and say this is absolute, but certainly colors in some perspective for us. So anyway, I told you I would give you some reading from that, and I've done that tonight. And that should open up some more vistas for you when you go back to consider what Jude said about the way of Cain, because it truly shows you it can't just simply be, well, he slew his brother, and therefore there was a rejecting of God, his way, and replacing God's desire with his own, what was in his heart, which I said is really the first false religion recorded in our history through the Bible. Anyway, much more on this, but right now I need you to get on the telephone. Get busy.